Welcome to the CEO Project Podcast, where Jim Schlexer, author of the best-selling book, Great CEOs Are Lazy, and the founder of the CEO Project, provides ideas and tools to help CEOs of mid to large-sized companies grow and optimize their businesses. Now, let's get started with the show. Hey, welcome everybody to the CEO Project Podcast. My name is Jim Schlexer. I am your host, and I am the founder of the CEO Project. Well, today you have the dream team. You have Sharon and myself. Hey, Sharon.
Hey, everybody.
And today we're going to talk about an interesting topic, which is family businesses. And for some of you, this is right in the bullseye because you're in a family business or you run a family business. For others, it might be something that's interesting because it is a particular configuration of a business that, many of us never have a chance to deal with. And we wonder, what does that look like? So I don't know, Sharon, have you ever been in a family business before?
Well, I'm running one right now.
Yeah, except for this one. Well, you're only on generation one. You're on G1.
Yeah, I'm on G1. But the other thought I just had was maybe if you're not running a family business or you're not the founder of a family business, you may be working for a family business and looking for what your potential is within the family business. So there's a lot of ways of looking at this topic.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because it is an issue and I'm mostly talking to, at this point, the family CEO and the family around that CEO. Like, what does it look like for you? And what should you be thinking about is really where I'm going. And I think the first question you got to ask is, who are we in service to? Who is this business in service to? And, the quick answer is, well, the family. The business is there to serve the family. And that's an option, but I think that can cause issues. I think you got to think about it serving the family and the employees. And that's really your point. What if I'm working for a family business and the family business is serving the family and I'm in the business? I'm like, geez, what am I? Chop liver? And you go, well,
right.
No, we love you. Yeah, that's not obvious to me.
But
if you marry one of my daughters or my son, that would be amazing. And that's kind of the line. If you don't have the blood or you're not making the blood through marriage, then it can be a hard place to be when you're in a family business because all the big slots go to family members. And that can be a real problem. We had one company we worked with, and he was a CEO. He had founded the business, but over time he brought in his sister and his cousin, and they had different jobs and a couple other people. But every time I talked to him, he would complain about their performance. He goes, she's not doing the job and he's lazy and blah, 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 blah. I'm like, listen, in fact, he was in one of our CEO peer groups, and the group wasn't just me. They go, listen, if you want to go from where you are, it was about a $90 million business. If you want to go from where you are to the next level, you're going to have to upscale your talent, which means your family may not be able to be there, or they're going to be in smaller roles. That's the deal.
Shift things around a bit.
You don't want to hear that. Didn't fire the family. He's still $90 million 5 years later. So, it's a choice. You can say that's okay because I provided stability for family and income for family, and I didn't need to be bigger. And so his business, his decision was, this business is in service to the family, not really to the employees. Or growth or anything else, or the shareholder, which he would be one of, right? So that'd be another option if, depending on who the shareholders are. And I think you have to think about, what is that family discount? How big a discount will I have to have a family member in the business? Is it a 5% discount to what I could get in the market in terms of talent and performance, or is it a 50% discount?
Yeah.
It's a very core question you got to ask as a family member, as a leader of the family.
And sometimes time will tell, or time will prove what you estimated, right or wrong.
Absolutely. And, one of the real issues here is professionalism. Are we going to run this like a family that runs a business, or are we going to run like a business that happens to be owned by a family?
Yeah.
And we see that this family, so think about like a purely professional executives, MBA types running a business. They make decisions a certain way, theoretically rational, probably maybe, and more or less number oriented. But then when you have a family business, you overlay, all these other things that show up and they influence the decisions. And sometimes that's the more important of the conversation. Like the money and the ration and the numbers aren't the big thing. It's what is the impact on the family is how we decide. And the money and the all comes second to that. And so
Interesting.
it's like a continuum, right?
Yeah.
Is it a 100% family decision and we make the decision for the family, or we go, it just happens to be family. We make it just like you would if you were running
Right.
IBM,
Right. Every
and,
competitive business. Yeah.
and the family thing doesn't come into effect. And you're somewhere on that gradation. I'll give you an example of this. I dealt with one company, and they were on third generation was running the business, and the fourth generation was in the business, starting to run things. And I asked, and there were a lot of family members in this particular business. It was a nice, old, stable business. And I was talking to the CEO, who was Generation Three, and I said, "Well, what are the other people at your generation? What are they doing?" And they had a couple different jobs, including the guy that ran the loading dock was G3.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, cool, good jobs for everybody.
Right.
So how do you think about compensation in within the family, right? I mean, you're the CEO, you've got a cousin, or I think it was a cousin, but at his G3 running the loading dock. How do you think about compensation? He goes, well, we get paid the same. I'm like,
Oh, that doesn't seem right.
wait. Well, that's what I said. I said, wait. Let me get this straight. You run the whole company. You lie awake at nights. You worry about revenue and profit and supply chain and all these other things and managing the family and legal liability. And he is running the loading dock. Who knows? He could be eating gummies at lunch and probably still doing his job. And he makes what you make. He goes, yeah. I'm like, okay. And,
Hmm.
on that family professionalism continuum, obviously that particular decision sat very heavily on the family side and not
Right.
so much on the purely financial executive kind of side of the equation. So this is a real fundamental issue. And I think as a family, you got to decide where you want to be. I think the other thing, and you see this a lot in family businesses, they go, everybody's part of the family.
Hmm.
If you work for us, you're a family, right? I mean, and my read has always
Until the
been,
distributions come out.
yeah, you forgot my Christmas present. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah, that's right. And I think it's a little disingenuous, would be the
Yeah.
best word, maybe. Like, oh, we're all family. Well, yeah, not really. Your family, I work for you. That's different. And it shows up, in various ways to pretend that people are family. The other thing it drives is this kind of paternalistic or maternalistic, if it's a man or a woman, leadership style. Give me an example of this on this professionalism curve is bonuses. So there's one company we've dealt with where you go, well, what's the bonus plan? And you go, nobody knows. At the end of the year, the person who runs that particular business decides, well, they did okay. We'll give them $5,000 or $10,000 or $50,000. And she did great. And we'll give her 5,000. Nobody knows what they need to do except this is what's the problem with this model. The only thing that works is suck up to the CEO
Yeah. It's very
and
subjective.
be in their good graces, right? And if you're in
Yeah.
their good graces, you got a shot at a good bonus. If you're not in their good graces, you probably won't get a good bonus. It's like Byzantine court, stabbing each other in the back to make sure you get
Right.
money.
Right. Right.
So that paternalistic, maternalistic leadership style shows up in these environments. And I think you have to be really careful to avoid it because it has that kind of negative consequence to it.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, as we've made efforts to professionalize the bonus program, there's been resistance on the part of that particular leader because they really like being Santa Claus
Yeah. Having all the decision making.
and handing out the money and here's and
Right.
then they love and they love the adulation and they love because everybody and they're like
It's like Oprah, and you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. And by the way, Timmy, this year you didn't get a car.
no,
Sorry.
yeah, no car for you. Yeah, well, it's right. So this is a way to gain compliance and loyalty, and I think loyalty is a big measurement in those environments. And loyalty is always part of the equation, but here it's like the equation. There's
Yeah.
only one
Yeah.
element in the equation, which is be loyal. I do think you have to do a good job as well, but there's a lot of loyalty built into it. So just something that you got to worry about is the sort of, professionalism one. The other thing that shows up is what I call the Thanksgiving dinner problem.
I already have that problem.
And you don't even have a family business.
Exactly.
We interviewed a woman not that long ago that had like mediation skills. And I'm like, boy, you must be popular at Thanksgiving. Like everybody wants you to come and
Right.
manage the conversation. But this really showed up for me. I was talking to one CEO who was Generation 7, G7. And that is an incredibly
Yeah.
rare
It's
thing.
very rare.
And he had one side of the business that was making a lot of money and another that was not really doing very well. In fact, it was losing money. That was the original part of the business. And I'm like, hey, this is easy, Kevin. We'll sell that part of after we tried all the various options that were available. We're like, okay, fine. Look, let's sell that and invest the money in the part of the business doing really, really well. And he goes, can't do it. I'm like, can't do it. Why not? He goes, Thanksgiving. I'm like,
Ugh.
what do you mean? He says, my grandmother comes to Thanksgiving, and I am not telling her that I'm selling the business that her great, 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 great grandfather started. I am not telling my grandmother that. And so, literally, Thanksgiving dinner prevented him from making what is an obvious economic and business
Business
choice.
decision. Yeah.
Couldn't do
Yeah.
it. So, anyway, the big thing to think about if you're in a family business is that professionalism curve. I think you got to like, where do we want to sit on that? And it's a
Mhm.
conscious choice. You can choose, no matter where you sit today, you can choose that. But the other one is succession. And I think this is a monstrous issue in family businesses.
Yeah.
Are there enough kids with enough interest in this business to join it or not? So that's first question. Is there even a person who can join the
Right.
business?
And how old are they currently? And when will I need them to take over? And are they slotted to be at the right place at the right time to take over?
And if you think about a generation, here's what's interesting. It used to be a generation was about 20 years, 23 years, because that's when you'd have your babies.
Right.
And now kids are having babies at, 31, 2, 3, 4, or 5. They're waiting, right? Like all of our kids are not going to probably won't have babies till they're in their 30s, most likely.
Yeah.
Well, now you got a 30-year gap
Right.
between, G1 and G2. So, if you said, well, next generation will be ready at 40, let's say. Well, it means you got to work till you're 70. It used to be you had to work till you were 60 and then 40
Right.
years. And then,
Right.
so this sort of brought increasing distance between generations is, I think, affecting the succession conversation for a lot of family businesses. Sometimes you can play it out where you got like brothers or sisters and you can pick the other branch of the family for a little bit, to cover if they're offset somewhat. But it's a real issue. What we think and what we've seen best practices though is obviously you get a good education for the kid,
Right.
great schools and all that. Hopefully you can afford it, probably can. But then have them go work somewhere else for a while.
Right. Exactly. Get a little experience with a different boss.
Absolutely. Because, they've heard about this business since they were, could hear.
And they
Um,
know who the boss is.
but you probably benefit from having been at multiple companies, seen
Absolutely.
multiple boss styles. I know I have.
Yeah.
And it makes me better. It's part of what peer groups do for CEOs. You get to see how 7 other CEOs do their job, and you're like, "Ooh, I like how she does this and he does
Exactly.
that." And
Exactly. You
and
can
I think that's
steal, you can mimic, and you can say, wow, I would never do that. And I don't want to ever be that type of boss.
I remember when Danny had an internship and he goes in and like this boss dad, he's horrible. Like he doesn't show up, he doesn't tell me what to do, and he's a kid, right? He slapped the big manual on my desk and go, "I'll be back in a week. Read that." And he's like, I'm not learning anything. The guy, and I'm like, remember this moment.
Yeah, you are. You are. You don't realize how much you're learning.
Uh, Just don't do any of the things this guy did because then that's good learning, right? So,
Exactly.
so anyway, have him go somewhere else for a while. Maybe 1 or 2 places would be optimal. Then come back into the business. And I think you got to start them moderately low if you can in the organization. If they roll in and they got the same last name and they're immediately an executive vice president at 29,
Yeah, that's a little
yeah, people go,
disheartening to all the other employees.
come on, really? Like, Is that how we're going to play it? And I think they benefit from working for some quality people in your organization too over time who teach them the ropes. And part of being in leadership is having a network, a social network of people that will support and you can ask questions of and will appreciate where you're going. And you build that by working for them and with them for a period of
Yeah.
time. And I mean, everybody knows they got the same last name as the guy or gal who owns the business, but like make them do a good job where they are. Really make them do a good
Right.
job. Be hard on them. And I maintain that you can't elevate them to CEO unless they put a couple of trophies in the case. So, give you an example. We got one business in Indiana we worked with, and they just announced the succession of G4, which is really good.
Hmm.
But, he worked somewhere, got a good education, worked somewhere else, came into the business, kind of worked his way up the business, and had some really, really good economic success and helped really build a relationship with a critical partner that drove lots and lots of revenue to the business. Well, you might promote him to CEO even if he didn't have the same last name because he did such
Right.
a good
Right.
job.
Yeah.
So if you can engineer putting your kid into a role where they have an opportunity to really make an impact on the business and have a big win, obvious big win then elevate them, people go, yeah, that kind of make right as opposed
And
to
and and people can buy into it and kind of say, well, I can see that, and I wouldn't mind working for him because I know he has accomplished this already.
yes. Yeah. Well, he or she built this whole, it's a third of our business now, and they built it. Like, yeah, of course they deserve to be CEO. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's what you hope. Now, sometimes there's no successor though. Like now we're at a point where there's just nobody there. They're not interested. They, for whatever reason, or not capable or whatever, they're just not, there's nobody. Or we didn't have enough kids. Maybe somebody didn't have any children. What do you do? And it turns out there's a category of executives that will slot in for a certain number of years, teach the next generation, and then you kind of skip a generation of family leadership with a professional manager. And they know, like, look, I know I'm out of here in 5, 10, whatever years. I know she's taken over, and that's cool. And my
Right.
job is to run the business and get her ready. Got it. And there's some very trustworthy people that will do that. They're not going to take over
Yeah.
the business. They can't. They'll always work for the person with the name on the building, but they'll bridge you from A to B. So that's available. And sometimes that's the best answer. Meaning, I think people commingle ownership with the job. They're like, well, I own the company, therefore I should be CEO.
Right.
And what if you're not the best CEO?
Well, I think that there's a bigger issue there. It's how do you realize you're not the best CEO, and will you be open to it? And if you are, then that is the best thing for your business for growth and stability and making it ready for the next generation. But not everybody in that seat is as willing to admit all those things.
I think it takes an immense amount of emotional maturity to pick that up and then do something about it. But, if you were completely non-emotional, you said, I've got this gigantic asset. I
Right.
obviously want the best human on the planet I can find to run this asset for me and my family. And oh, by the way, that's not me. We hire one of these professional execs and let them
Right.
run the business. There's nothing wrong with that. There are lots of
Nothing wrong with that. And you can be chairman, you can be, you know, a couple other titles and let this person do the day-to-day operations.
uh, look at Marriott. There's not a Marriott running Marriott right now.
Yeah, yeah, we know that.
So, and there's lots of other businesses that look just like that. It's some hired, they were developed over time in the business and they run it. So, there are interesting statistics for you. All right. So, from generation one to generation two, how many businesses make it to generation two as
I'm guessing,
a percentage? Yeah,
I'm going to say 45%.
30%.
Oh, I was
A
too optimistic.
little too ambitious. Yeah, a third of businesses make it to generation two for all these reasons we're talking about. Succession didn't work out. There was nobody who even wanted to do it, let alone could do it. They're like, hey, I want to be an environmental engineer and it has nothing to do with the machine tool shop that you built. I have no interest,
Yeah.
right? How about from generation two to generation three? What percentage make it maybe from G1 to G3? What percentage make it to G3?
Let's go 10%.
Excellent, 12%. Well,
Okay.
good guess. You're getting more pessimistic. Perfect. Okay, and the last one I have statistics for G4, fourth generation, which is like the business I mentioned with the bonuses
Right.
thing. They're on G4. The one where I mentioned that they just announced it, that's G4. So pretty rare.
We
Now,
know some successes in that area.
it can happen. And the one I mentioned about Thanksgiving, that was actually G7. I don't even have a statistic on G7.
Yeah.
So, but it's almost zero. So what's G4 from G1 to G4? What percentage?
Let's say 4%.
Yeah, good guess, 3%. Yeah.
Mm.
So if you're on G3, the probability or G2 3 and the probability you make it to G4, 3%. Well, 25%, right? Because 12 goes to 3, 25% probability. So it's not, this is like really hard to do when that
Right.
many, a successful company can't make the leap to the next generation.
It's a lot of awkward Thanksgivings.
Well, you have to be willing to do that if you want to. Are we honoring the family or honoring the business? And you try to do both, but sometimes you got to sacrifice a little family to honor the business and
Yeah.
any other way around. I think the challenge, and you mentioned it before, is how do you keep great talent? If I know I can never be CEO of this business and maybe never even a VP because it's all going to be family, like
Yeah.
why do I stick around?
So that is an interesting question, and it leads me to talk about A players, B players, C players.
Yep.
Because I mean, a, a great A player may enjoy working for a family business to learn what the business is. Maybe they are interested in an adjacent business or a strategic business, but they're not going to stay around if there's no potential for their growth.
And then A knows they can go find another job tomorrow if that's what they
Yeah.
want.
Yeah.
So it may be a really effective way of ending up with a bunch of B's and C's.
Yeah.
I worked for, it felt like a family business, but it wasn't anymore. Well, it was owned by family, but it was not run by family anymore. And I used to joke it was a perfect filter to get rid of all the A's. And they're pretty good
Yeah.
at getting rid of C's. And they had a whole bunch of B's running around that building, but very few A's. I mean, I stuck around for a while and eventually I'm like, yeah, I can't be here anymore. So,
Yeah.
but I think you have to throw really interesting work at those people, and you probably have to pay them a little more than market. And that's done. They effectively bribe them to stick around by
Yeah.
paying them golden handcuffs, right? You could
Yeah.
leave, but you'll make less money.
Yeah. Perks and, things like that. And we do love the B players. The B players get the job done. They're loyal and they will, you know, come up with great ideas.
Need lots and lots of B's, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So it's not the worst thing in the world, and
No.
A's cause trouble. So, you got to be careful about how many of those you want around. But you're right. I mean, perks is another way to do it, right? We're going to give you a car or truck. We're going to help pay for your down payment on your house. We're going to
Or
like
or there's
these.
a tuition assistance program for your children.
Yep, exactly. So those are things that are hard to do in a very public environment
Yeah.
or private equity owned environment. But in family, we don't have to report to anybody but ourselves. So we can do all kinds of creative stuff for people that we want to have stick around. And I think, like we advise any other company, you ought to know who your A's are and then love bomb them in whatever appropriate way you need to do it to keep them to stick around.
Hmm.
Because otherwise, to your point, the ambitious ones will hang there for a little while and go, yeah, I can't be here much
I've
longer.
reached my ceiling. I've reached my ceiling.
Unless I'm going to marry one of the daughters. Yeah, I'm done. I'm done.
Hmm.
So, or sons, as I said. I think just maybe two last thoughts. One is how do you keep the family and the business aligned? And the idea of a family board or family meetings make a lot of sense here. Let's talk about what's going on in the business. Literally report financially as almost shareholders. Here's where we are. Here's how we're doing. Here's where we're going. It's a little unusual to have that level of transparency in a family business, but I think it's really healthy when you think about
Yeah.
trying to build multiple generations of running the business. You bring not only your peers, but the next generation into these things. I've actually seen one family that did specific offsites by generation. So they'd do a G2 meetings and
Oh,
they'd have
interesting.
G3 meetings. Okay, you're here. What's going on? When's dad going to retire? So they could literally do their little powwow. So I think family meetings are a really important part. I think though you just again on that professionalism family conversation, the family meeting is one thing. Is the board the family, or do I maybe bring in some outside brains and people
Yeah.
to
Yeah. I vote
help?
for the outside.
Well, I would too, but I'm not running, I'm not G3 of a sizable company, and I might go, I just want family members. But I think good practice would probably to bring in some outside people, give
Right.
you a little different view. But it's a real question. So, should the family board be the board, or is the family board something we use to keep everybody aligned and going in the same direction? And the board, the fiduciary board, being best in class, whatever we can find. Maybe
Yeah.
a little discount for a couple of family members, but you can't load it up with family members. So, my last thought is about legacy. This is always an issue in family businesses. Like, what is the legacy going to be? Literally of this generation, right? And the book, I remember I was in Florence and there was, the Medicis were there. And do you know who the Medici family was? Do you know what they did or why they're,
No.
oh, not good. Well, we'll do a teeny little bit of Italian history here. So the Medicis were the bankers to the papacy. So they banked the Pope, basically. And,
Okay.
Pope has a lot of money, or had a
Yeah.
lot, even now has a lot of money and a lot of art. And so they were in an amazingly influential place within the Catholic Church, banking the papacy and so forth. So the Medicis became fabulously wealthy, including, positioning a couple of the Medici kids to become Pope. So a few Medicis were popes as well. So
Oh,
like
wow.
very interrelated institutions, if you will. But what struck me is, and had the Medici family bank that for 14, 15 generations, crazy long time. So there was a book in the gift shop about the Medici family. I'm like, well, that's interesting. I'm going to buy that. And I bought it. And it is funny as you go through the book, some of the Medicis had very thick chapters. Enrico funded Michelangelo and he did this and he got this statue and he opened this up and he got fresh water here and his two sons became popes and blah, 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 blah. All his, he expanded the business. And then once in a while, there was a really thin chapter. They go, yeah, yeah, Bob ran the Medici family bank for 2 years, period. They're like very, very silent about what he accomplished during his time. They were all men at
Right.
the time, in the family. And so I think the question is running a multi-generational family is like, do you want a thick chapter or you want a thin chapter? What's my legacy going to be? And one family member we're working with, I said, look, your legacy is going to be bringing in a real professional management team and professionalizing the business. In other words, shift ourselves on that continuum a little bit away from it's still going to be family run and all that and very paternalistic, maternalistic, but move that needle a little closer to the middle. That's going to be your legacy and that's going to propel the next level of growth. So you'll have a nice thick chapter by the time you're done because it's hard to do that in a organization that's been the needle's been pegged on the family side.
Right. Right.
We're
Right.
going to move it a little bit to the side. So there'll be a thick chapter, but it's not easy to your point about
Mm.
Thanksgiving dinner and all those things. So anyway, I hope that was helpful for people that were listening. No, you pick up anything, Sharon?
A lot. But the other thing just
Hmm,
wanted to add is
please,
that
before we.
the notion of a family business is really wonderful and great, and having multiple generations are really great. But I also think you, as let's just say you are the CEO, you're generation three, your child, male or female, doesn't matter, is kind of stepping up to be generation four. How do you give that person the best resources to be a successful G4?
Yeah.
And that's not only you as G3.
No, obviously we're a fan of CEO peer groups, getting a
Right.
good education, maybe having G3 family meetings. I think like what infrastructure can I put around that person to make them
For the
super.
success to keep happening. Yeah.
I think, and sometimes I think the most important thing you can do is just get the heck out of the way at some point.
Yeah.
Because we see prior generations kind of hanging on to the glory
Right.
and they just won't go away and let the next generation do their thing.
Yeah.
So 100%, CEO peer groups, education, family meetings, have them work at another place for a while. And then when the time comes, just get out of the way.
Right.
Yeah.
Let
Awesome.
let go of the reins slowly, but then definitely let them go.
Well, and we just had one. It was announced, and it was like date certain, January 1st, done. I don't run this company anymore. I'm chairman of the board.
Hmm.
So and so runs the business. I'm not even coming in anymore.
Yeah.
Call me if you need me. Yeah, very effective. He was ready, and so was the son at that particular case. So awesome.
Right. Right.
Well, hey, everybody, thank you for joining us on the CEO Project podcast, and hopefully you picked up a few things. But in any case, we will see you next week. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening to the CEO Project podcast. We'll see you next time. Be sure to subscribe to get all the future episodes and check out our website, www.theceoproject.com.